All right, guys, we're live. Episode number 45 of the Before the Trainwreck series. I'm joined today by, of course, Dr. Shawn T Smith and special guest Dr. Rollo Tomasi.
Dr. Rollo Tomasi, emeritus, only emeritus.
Not a doctor, but
I don't want to
yeah,
spread those rumors. I get
yeah,
enough
yeah,
rumors
yeah.
spread about me already.
Yeah, so we've put this show together because two episodes ago, so about a month ago, we had Dr. Robert Glover on, Dr. Smith. We're just kind of shooting the breeze back and forth about his new book and some other ideas. And the conversation piece came up about hypergamy, and both the good doctors said they didn't see a lot of evidence of it in their clinical practice. So I thought it'd be a good idea to bring Rollo on because, I mean, this is not my wheelhouse. I know this is something that you talk about pretty much more than anything in your books and your blogs and your live broadcasts. So um, let's let's kind of start with a little introductory story to what hypergamy is. So I dug up this piece from one of the chapters in my book. I'll share this story. It's called the Amazon, and the Amazon was a woman that I met a number of years ago off a dating app. She showed up. I'm going to say quite a bit different than what I expected her to show up as. I kind of have a height limit. Anything over 6 foot tall for me is too much woman. I like shorter women, definitely shorter than 5'10". So the Amazon shows up. I mean, I'm about 6'2.5", right? So the Amazon shows up, and I'm like, all right, well, let's go get this drink because we're here anyway. But she's not really, blowing my hair back or what I had left of it at the time anyway. And we sit down. This was well before I read any of Sean's work or Rollo's work or any of the stuff that I'd gotten into. We sit down, we start rapping back and forth about 15 minutes, and then she proceeds to tell me that she has a policy where she makes guys wait 8 dates before she sleeps with them. And I took it upon myself to say, well, that's absolutely absurd. You're taking away any kind of natural connection. It's not organic, and you're trying to negotiate, certain rules of desire. And then we went back and forth with a little banter for a couple minutes. And because I held firm on position, she went from making rules for somebody that she was shit testing to be a beta, and she flipped over to the other side of the equation, the hypergamy equation, and went on the alpha side. She said, little huff of her giant push-up boobs in the top and said, let's go to the bathroom and bang right now. So she went from shit testing me as a beta to putting me into an alpha category and was ready to get into it right away. It was probably like the second time in my life that I passed on sex with anybody. But that's an alpha beta sort of hypergamy scale. And there's so many different parts of the rabbit hole that you can go down with this on. So it's not just alpha seed and beta need. It's something that comes up a lot in different areas of the conversations that we have. But where do you guys want to kick off on this talk of hypergamy and your positions on it?
Well,
I
let
mean,
me
Sean,
let
you
me
put out a
jump.
video yesterday too, right?
Yeah, I put out a video yesterday, and I want to start with a little gratitude first of all, because I was really pretty unaware of this whole red pill community before I wrote my book, and then I sent you the book because I came across some of your YouTube videos, Rich, and then you sort of opened the door to this community for me, and I've met a lot of amazing guys, and you all allow me to come in here and disagree and talk shit, and as far as I know, nobody's excommunicated me yet, so I really appreciate that I keep getting invited back. It means a lot to me. As far as my position on the video that I put out yesterday, maybe after we publish this, you can put a link so the guys will know what we're talking about. But I put
I'll
this
grab
video
the
up.
link and just drop it in the chat. You guys can open it up in a new window and watch it later.
Yeah, it's about 42 minutes, so it's a time investment. And my basic stance was not that I don't see hypergamy. I see hypergamy everywhere. It's leaves on the trees. We're shaped by evolution and all kinds of forces, and hypergamy is out there. Well, the point that I made in the video was that I don't see it being the demise of relationships to the extent that I hear about. Not so much from the red pill community, like not so much from you, Rollo. I think a little bit from you, but a lot of guys who are out there being hysterical on Twitter and on YouTube saying that hypergamy is going to get you. And I'm seeing that, yes, it does end relationships sometimes, but there are bigger things to worry about if you are actually in a relationship and you want to keep things going smoothly. So there's my basic stance.
You and I, we had this conversation, sort of like an impromptu. Gosh, when was it? Was it during the holiday break? I think it was you, myself, Ryan, and Rich got together. What it wasn't on my channel. It was on
I think it was on your
Ryan's
channel.
channel. Was it on my channel?
Yeah.
Yeah, where we kind of just decided to have a conversation about this not too long ago, and I kind of figured it was going to be something that was going to lead to a bigger conversation. And then, of course, when you guys were on with Dr. Glover, I wish I could have come on then, but I think I was flying back from like Las Vegas or something that time. So, but I'm glad another thing, I also appreciate that you're candid about all of this stuff too, because a lot of a lot of the people that I know who are clinical psychologists won't have this conversation.
No.
There are very few, and I know a few of them because I've been at the, when I was at the conventions, I had guys come up to me and say, hey, my therapist actually gave me The Rational Male, and that's how I know about you. And I was just kind of floored that, the reach that my book had. And so, but like for the most part, most psychologists don't want to have this conversation. And I think a lot of it is, it's uncomfortable.
What topic do you think they're avoiding?
Well, first of all, I think they're avoiding evolutionary psychology, first and foremost, because it's sort of like the bastard child of psychology right now. And it's almost like whenever I have this conversation, whenever I'm talking, because I'm not a psychologist, okay? I have a bachelor's degree in behavioral psychology, all right? I have a bachelor's degree in a bachelor's of fine arts. Those are my 2 degrees. So it's not like I work and do this stuff all the time. I'm just I've been in the manosphere for almost 20 years now. I mean, really since 2002, so 18 years. And a lot of what I understand comes from either behavioral psychology or what I know of evolutionary psychology in relation and in the context of working with guys or having conversations. I've done peer counseling. I still occasionally I do counseling, online right now. But really, it's not. I call it counseling, but it's certainly not like me trying to like give advice or anything. I'm just, all I do is people call me up or they'll email me and they'll say, "What do you think about the situation?" I'll tell them what I think. That's probably the depth of where I go with stuff like this. But I think that the biggest problem right now, and I do understand why you got to understand why we're having this conversation. The reason is because right now the red pill is also being bastardized. Really, I think MGTOW is being bastardized, but I think that when I was listening to your most recent video, and in the interest of full disclosure, you did give me the script before you went and published it, so I was reading it.
You were the first one to see it.
Yeah. So just so everybody knows. But I really thought there was kind of like three separate points here, and like really the first one is defining what hypergamy really is, and that's where I think people kind of drop the ball. I have been, everybody, when they talk about my name, they associate me with the word hypergamy. For a long time, I was the first or second return. If you typed in hypergamy on Google, you would find my blog right there. I think you still find it on the first page. So I've talked about this for a long time. There's the definition, I think, of what hypergamy is. But before we even get to that, we have to remember who is, what's the demographic, or what's the faction of the manosphere right now that is saying we're doomed. We're not, because hypergamy exists, I'm going to give up. I'm going to stop trying. Why would I even want to get into a relationship with a woman? If hypergamy exists, it's just a waste of my time because I'll never be as good as the next guy that walks in and she'll want to get after him. It's this complete surrender, I think, to determinism. Like there's an idea that, and I've written about I've done probably like 4 different essays on the misconceptions of hypergamy. You're not the first person I've had this conversation with either. I actually got into a debate with Alexander Grace after a while when he decided he didn't want to be red pill anymore, because he said the same thing. He says all of these guys are kind of losing heart, or they don't want to start a relationship because they think that their relationship will be doomed. Much of what MGTOW is based on is this idea that if they, their idea, really, MGTOW's idea is that women aren't worth it. Women, putting themselves out there is not worth it. Making women the measure of their own ego, or the measure of their lives, the measure of what it is that they do, who they are as a man, is something that they are like reclaiming. But in doing so, they tend to isolate themselves. It's not to say that there aren't MGTOWs that date and everything else, but I think that part of their decisions to do this are part of that nihilism or part of the black pill for sure. I'm not sure if you're familiar with like all the jingoism right now that's sort of floating around in the manosphere. But when I see this, I look at this and I go, that's not what red pill is. And Rich knows this and Ryan knows this. And, you know, from the very get-go, we have been trying for a very long time to impress upon people that the red pill is a praxology, is not an ideology. It is not a prescription. It is not something that you do. It's something that you understand. It is a tool set. It is not the actual product of whatever you build with that tool set. So what people are doing, I think, and you're probably seeing this, because when you were doing your video and when I was reading the script, a lot of the examples you were giving were of guys who are, it seemed to me, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but it seemed to me that these are the guys who are giving up. These are the guys who want to blame their ineffectiveness, I guess, in their relationships on the fact that hypergamy is a good kind of scapegoat for their own failings. And I understand that, but you also have to come back to there's also a kind of a paradox, I think, between what is hypergamy and then what is like the personal responsibility of that person. So do you understand what I'm saying? Is that what I'm getting from you? Is like you're seeing these guys who are just sort of giving up on life because of it?
No, I quoted a few blog posts and I tried to keep them anonymous. And the post that I quoted, I tried to narrow them down to guys who are regurgitating. Maybe I should rephrase that, but they are restating what they understand to be this theory of female motivation. And these are guys who had not necessarily given up, but they were, I guess one way to say it would be they were giving a much more black and white view of the more nuanced view that you give of hypergamy. You and I don't agree completely on your framing of hypergamy, but I give you a lot of credit for being, you think a lot and you have some nuanced views. These guys don't. They have this, here's how hypergamy works. This is what you need to know about women. This is the first, second, and third thing you need to know, and they're all hypergamy, and hypergamy is going to get you in the end. And it's not so much that they were giving up, it's just that they were giving a lot of agency to this boogeyman to ruin their relationships.
Yeah. Well, what was it? Ryan would say it's a solution in search of a problem. And it's from what I see, and this is something I think that has really intensified, I think, within the last couple of years, is guys will pick up, like another thing I get all the time is one of my theories is that men and women approach love with different concepts. Like men are more idealistic in their approach to love. Women are more opportunistic as a result of their innate mating strategies and their innate natures as human males or human females. What guys do then is they pick up on what I say and they say, Rollo said that that men or women can't love men. And I'm like, no, dude, go back and read what I said. Again, it's that nuance. But when you get people like that, you're not going to be able. I mean, particularly people who are emotional, guys who are picking up on this for the first time. Maybe you're right. I think there's a part of what you said in your video about how these guys will get to a kind of a traumatic point in their lives. And they're, like I said, it's a solution in search of a problem is what it is. So you've got this, hypergamy as sort of this deterministic, almost too perfect solution to the problem that they have. And they go, you know what? I broke up with my girlfriend. It must have been hypergamy. It must have been this, or it is after the fact rationalization or it's before the fact rationalization. And so when they get into this and they don't really, I can't sit there and force them to read every one of the 700 some odd essays that I have or read my books or whatever else.
Wouldn't matter if you did.
And it wouldn't matter if I did, because where they're at in life at that point is I can't make everybody think the same way I do. That's one of the reasons why I don't do prescriptions. That's why I keep insisting that the red pill should be a praxology and it's a tool set. And I'm not in the business of making men better men. I'm in the business of helping men make themselves better men. But that's not what a lot of guys want, especially not this generation. Certainly not the Lost Boys generation. They're looking for a purpose. They're looking for somebody to hold their hand through life and give them the cheat codes to the video game that is their lives. And so when they see something like this, I think that's when they sort of take it to the nth degree. They decide that this is going to be the answer to everything. And I have to stop in my tracks these days too, because guys will say, Rollo, I read your book and it really changed my life. And I understand that hypergamy was a big thing that was going on with the breakup between me and my girlfriend. I'm like, maybe, tell me more about it, because you have to kind of get in depth, but it's almost like an overgeneralization. And I do understand that. So actually one of the first things I told Alexander Grace, I said, and I will stress it in this show too, hypergamy is not a straitjacket. There are a lot of other variables that go along with that. One of those, of course, was the monkey branching thing that you were talking about. And I think that is, I think you're giving a little bit too short shrift to that. Only because once again, because hypergamy is not a straitjacket, it is modified by external variables, meaning like a woman who is 100 pounds overweight, her capacity to optimize hypergamy is a lot less, or a lot different, let's just say, from a woman who is, a 9 in a hot swimsuit model, and she can explore, she can be a lot more opportunistic than, say, the woman who is more necessitous. Mm-hmm. So there is that aspect there.
Are we talking about the beginning of relationships or the ending of relationships?
A beginning of a relationship, an end of a relationship, whatever happens in between. The other thing is a lot of guys will tell me this. They'll say, well, this is a misconception as well. It's like guys will say, well, some women are more hypergamous than others. And I go, that's a qualification that has nothing to do with hypergamy. Okay. Hypergamy is women's innate mating strategy. And that's where we get back to the definition of all this. It's the innate mating strategy. So it's like this, it's kind of like a subroutine that's going on in a woman's subconscious. It's always looking for the bigger and better thing, but that is also modified by culture, by religion, by family, by upbringing, by opportunity, by is she fat? Is she good looking? There's, like I said, there's 100 different variables that can make that. Is she in a good, healthy relationship? One of the things, and getting into the ovulatory shift concept here, and these were findings by Marty Hazelton, is that if a man and a woman are in a relationship together, and a woman gets into her proliferative phase, guys will say this. They'll say, well, if she finds a better guy, she's going to go out and bang him and then come back to me and say she's sorry, right? That's their over-the-top extreme, rationalizations, right? But if you look at this, if you look at the work and you look at the studies, what happens is if a woman is in a quote-unquote satisfying relationship with that guy, she becomes more sexual with the guy that she's in the relationship with. Mm-hmm. That goes against entirely what these guys are saying, that, oh, well, if another guy comes along, he's going to, swoop on my girl. So there is, and of course, if women are in an quote unquote unsatisfying relationship, that was correlated with an incidence of extra pair, going off and philandering, or whatever you want to call it. So there's a lot of different variables that are involved in how that woman expresses, how she can optimize, how things change for her according to what her mating strategy is. And then on top of that, the other variable is men's counteracting, mating strategy on top of that. So there's like this. I think you, either myself or somebody else told you should probably read Promiscuity by Tim Burkhead. Mm-hmm. And that's I'll warn you, it's kind of dry reading. You have to put your science glasses on. Yeah, good. Yeah. How much did that run you, by the way? I think it's like $100 book these days.
It is, but I got it on eBay for like $8. So I gotta steal.
Really? Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, having to read at that, and you look at things from more of an animalistic, a more natural history kind of perspective. Monogamy is actually an outlier, whereas promiscuity is really the way that most animals will breed, and that's a good thing. And that's another thing people will say, well, hypergamy is evil, it's bad, it's horrible. And it's like, no, first of all, I'm not saying that. I never said that. But guys want to apply good versus evil, or women are because women are hypergamous, that they're inherently bad, they're inherently immoral, there's something wrong with them. And I've said this on Rich's show, on my show, a dozen different times, is that we used to have buffers on hypergamy that we no longer have anymore. After the sexual revolution, shit changed. And now we have, we can see the fallout from this. We can see, abortion on demand. We can see the divorce laws. We can see just child support laws. We can see no fault divorce, the Duluth model feminism, all of these things that sort of came in the wake of that, of sort of unfettering, I think, hypergamy. But prior to that, we had social stigmas, we had religious stigmas, we had all kinds of ways to control for that. I know Rich is reading this book as well, but I would also suggest that you read Alpha God by Dr. Hector Garcia, another Evo Psych guy. I don't necessarily agree with him with respect to his views on feminism, but he is a very good researcher. I'll give him that. So I think probably the best place to start, and not to go too far over here, is defining what hypergamy really is in the first place. Because I felt like when you were doing your video, and this is something that's common, I think, because Jordan Peterson actually does this as well, is they focus only on one side of hypergamy. They only, if you were to ask Jordan Peterson what his definition of hypergamy is, he would have the newer definition, right? Not the one from India and 1850s or whatever it is, but his definition would be that women marry up, or women look for a guy who's higher on the socio-economic, the male dominance hierarchy. Mm-hmm. You're only looking at it from the from the beta buck side of things. Now, we've always said this in the red pill, is that hypergamy consists of alpha fucks and beta bucks, alpha seed, beta need. Alpha seed is the short-term sort of sexy sons side of a woman's sexual strategy, wanting to breed with the best biological genetic specimen that she can, have that guy's babies, and hopefully that guy is also a good provider, also is interested in parental investment, also is loves puppies, loves his mom, is a funny guy, is and all of the comfort and the provisioning side of that. Hopefully, if not, then she looks for it in another guy. So you've got alpha seed, you've got beta need. Everybody wants to focus on the beta need because that is the PC correct way. I separate these out too. So when we're talking about alpha seed and beta need, I would say, well, alpha seed is based on arousal. If you ask a woman what she's attracted to, she's going to give you all the qualities of the guy that she wants to have a long-term relationship with, as opposed to the short-term sexual relationship that she wants to have. And I think it's pretty well studied that women will opt for either a short-term fling or a long-term sexual partner. So I think really where you're going, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I think really what you're doing in this one anyways is focusing primarily on the provisioning side of hypergamy.
Yeah, I didn't really break it down that way. I know that my profession is kind of hesitant to talk about the alpha side of anything, and the alpha side, particularly there is something to ovulatory shift. There's no disagreement there, and my profession is uncomfortable with facts like that. But really, where I was going with the video is fits in line with the theme of the show that Rich and I have here. It's called Before the Train Wreck. So you have this information coming in. How do you use it? How do you incorporate this stuff to avoid the train wreck? And a lot of what I was criticizing, and I was pretty critical of the way people think about things. And I'll give you an example of the kind of thing that troubles me and the kind of thing that I think can throw guys off because it can get them worrying about the wrong thing. You and I are both aware of the Sweden study that came out recently, where they found, I'll give it a quick description here. They found in Sweden that women who are elected to high office or appointed to CEO position, they have a more than 100% increased chance of divorce risk. There's a lot of demographics here. I read through the study, and the way it works is among this group of women, which is probably a group of outliers, right? Because they're CEOs, they're politicians. On paper, they probably look a little more like men personality-wise than women in some ways. So they're probably not a perfectly representative sample. But anyway, we got this group, this specialized group of women. And among that specialized group of women, there's a default 6% divorce rate. And if they are elected to high office or get appointed CEO, and they come from a household where the division of labor and income is more traditional, meaning the man is typically more the provider, then their divorce rate goes up from 6% to 13%. So just to put things in perspective, we're talking about a 7% increase among a very small group of women. But science reporting being what it is, this gets touted as, oh, it's more than 100% risk. They're all going to get divorced if they get promoted. Well, 93% of them are not affected by this, but still there's an effect there. Okay. So we can't deny that there's an effect there. So the way this gets reported on one hand is that men are being insecure and they're being unenlightened and they're being throwbacks and they just can't tolerate having a successful woman in their life. And so they run off, and that's what causes a divorce. Now, from the data we have, these three pieces of data, which are position and income and the structure of the home, nobody can make that kind of assumption about it. There's no data here that speaks to motives. There's just demographic data. Right. You can guess from that. So the common narrative is men are being insecure. It's useless because it's pointless, because it's based on nothing. The other narrative that is coming from the red pill community is that this is due to hypergamy. Now, I will be forthright here, and I'll say that I always separate my personal opinion from my clinical opinion. My personal opinion is that there's a big piece of hypergamy at play here, that probably, if I had to guess, that probably among this small percentage of women who make this decision, that they're uncomfortable with the fact that they are now at a higher social level or higher level in the dominance hierarchy, I guess, than their husbands are. And that's not a position they like. And so they try to rectify that. That's probably some motivation in this small percentage of women. That's my personal opinion. My clinical opinion is that's bullshit, because I don't know. We don't know. But the red pill community will say, well, there's hypergamy. There's proof of hypergamy. What more do you need? There it is right there in front of your face. And so this puts guys in the mindset of focusing on the wrong problem. And you want to focus on things that ruin relationships: alcohol, being a piss poor communicator, making unintentional decisions like getting a puppy with your girlfriend. That's the kind of stuff that ends up destroying your life. 7 women in Sweden getting divorced. It's not really anything you probably need to focus on here. So go ahead. I
was just gonna say, I read that. Actually, I interacted with one of the guys who was reporting on that, the data set for, like, when it first came out. I don't know the guy personally, but when it first came out, somebody linked it to me, and I started talking with this guy, and I asked the guy, I said, did you guys control for who initiated the divorce? So, because that, you want to get into, just sort of the nuts and bolts of, is this hypergamy? Is this not? I don't necessarily see those results as a direct, correlation to hypergamy. When I see that, I need to know more data about that. That's why the first thing I asked was who initiated the divorce? Because even if there is a higher incidence of divorce, in, say 15-17% of these women, who is initiating that divorce is,
that would be a little indication of motivation.
Is even more important. Okay. So, but here's my curiosity was this: why didn't you control for that? Why was that not even part of the thing? And the reason for that is because it was not politically correct to do something like that. Because if they had found that it was 100% the women who were filing for divorce, then maybe I might be a little bit more inclined to think, well, maybe this is a positive indicator of the theory of hypergamy. Okay. It's one data set. It's not the be all end all. It's not like gonna convince, like if I was like just, a layman on the street and somebody said, hey, hypergamy is this, and look, here's this data, I might be a little skeptical at that. But if you show me this, and you show me 70% of women actually initiate divorce, and you show me the other data sets that I've been studying for the last 18 years, then I'm building up sort of a better case. This is one case amongst many that are going on. So the bigger question I had is why weren't they controlling for that, and will they do it in the future? No, they're not going to. And my
hypergamy, because they probably don't know that word. They just know that it might make women look bad if women were initiated divorce.
If they've ever even heard of hypergamy, they probably know the old school definition of it from way back in the day, right? In the Indian anthropology study or sociology studies.
Well, we can make men look bad, but we can't make women look bad in the social sciences. Right. Which is really unfortunate. It's not a healthy way to view either sex.
Yeah, and let's put a little sticky note next to that right there, because right now I think in one of the major failings of really psychology and I'm not harp on your practice here, because like when you did that video about the APA and their ruling, between the guidelines for men and the guidelines for women, obviously we see a very sharp bias with respect to us living in this gynocentric social order. Whereas prior to really, I think didn't you say 1950s? I think you said something like that, when it was much more of I guess an androcentric or a patriarchal way of viewing psychology from the 50s.
Yeah. This is a book, one of the books that I highlighted in the video.
Yeah.
It's from 1946, and it's written for an eighth grader. But this is the last example I have of psychology idealizing masculinity. I don't think this is healthy. I don't think you should necessarily be idealizing either gender. Maybe you can idealize the traits that work out well on either side. But 1946 is the last example I have of psychology appreciating men. I'm sure there are more.
Let me ask you this, though, and I don't think
drop this in here for a second. I just want to interrupt because there's an interesting comment here from this guy Buck, and he says, "How's this for alpha seed, beta need? My ex and I were off and on for 2.5 years. Every time we broke up, she got involved with guys that were in a much better financial position than I." And he goes on to say, "However, she would come back when she got bored with them. Why? Because I was alpha seed and she wasn't aroused by these guys with money." By the way, Rich, the joint feature page is not available on YouTube. Okay, no problem.
So can you go back to that last comment? The
last one. However, she would come back when she got bored with them. Why? Because I was the alpha seed and she wasn't aroused by the money.
Okay, so the why, we don't know why. Maybe he knows why. Maybe he clearly has more information.
His interpretation of why.
It's his interpretation of things. And this is where you got to be so careful. And this is what I was really harping on in the video, is how do you process data? Have you ever heard of what's it called? Theory ladenness? It's kind of an obscure term, but it comes out of philosophy of science, and it's been around for about 100 years. And it's just a really basic idea that when you have a framework for viewing the world, whatever data comes in, you're going to filter it through that framework. So a quick example is, and I'm not going to remember this guy's name, but there's an experiment a while ago, like decades ago, where this psychologist was flashing images on a screen of playing cards, like Ace of Hearts, Seven of Diamonds, whatever. And he flash them up there just for a millisecond, not a millisecond, but a very brief period of time. And he would throw some false ones in there, like a red 8 of clubs, right? And clubs are black. So what people report is that they saw a black 8 of clubs, because in their mind, they corrected it. They weren't even aware that they corrected it, but they were operating from the standpoint that there are 4 suits of cards, which is correct. That's their theoretical framework. And anything that came in that didn't fit that was immediately corrected and filtered into that way of viewing the world. And so if a guy like this, and I shouldn't be speaking about this guy directly, but I'll speak about him generically, that if a guy has the viewpoint that hypergamy is going to explain behaviors, then when a behavior comes along and it doesn't quite make sense, you're going to put it into that framework if you're not careful about how you're processing your information. And so maybe hypergamy is the answer. It absolutely happens sometimes, and maybe it was the answer in his case. But you got to be really careful in life. I sound like a preacher now. You got to be careful about how you're processing the data that comes in, and being thoughtful about how you ascribe it to whatever theoretical framework floats your boat at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Well, let me ask you this then, because I know you were saying that you don't think that hypergamy is necessarily a predictive framework. So if that's the case, right, and you're just saying this right here, is like, well, just because the guy's girlfriend goes off with these guys and gets bored with them, comes back and bangs him, that's not necessarily, I mean, probably is, but like, it's not necessarily, it could be something else. Well, what's the something else is what I'd like to know. Is like, what is the, okay, but what's my question is this, is if not hypergamy as a predictive framework, then what? Then what else?
See, this is where you and I start to approach things differently, because I always, as a clinician, I always start with, I don't know. And so if he came to me with this problem and he had already formulated it, as this is an example of hypergamy. I was the beta bucks and I was getting used over and over. Well, that part's indisputable. The fact that there was a pattern of her behavior of going out, coming back, going out, coming back, that's data that's indisputable. But one of my first clinical supervisors always said to me that the patient's formulation is usually bullshit. You don't buy it because they're usually misled. They usually can't see their situation clearly. Now, I'm not saying that he's wrong. He could be absolutely right. And the data, an exploration of that might lead a guy to that conclusion. But if it were my life, if I were in that guy's shoes, I'd be asking a lot of questions about why this happens rather than, and maybe he's already done that, maybe he's already done that work and this is a conclusion he arrived at. But I would start with a whole lot of questions about, all right, what this is a weird pattern. Why did this happen? Where else have I seen it? Has it shown up elsewhere in my life before? How does she resemble other women that I've had in my life? So on and so forth, and really going down, collecting as much data as possible. And I'll make one last point and then I'll shut up because I know you got things to say, Rollo, but this is one of the things that I really dislike about the way social sciences collect data and form theories. And I've always disliked this. From my first statistics class and my first research methods class, I've really disliked this because what they try to do, and I understand the purpose of it, what they try to do is take an N of 30 and extract as little data as possible and then extract as much theory as they can out of that. That's one way of doing the social sciences. There's another way. The big 5 personality traits are an example of the other way, which is more inductive, which is you collect as much data as you possibly can, and then you see what patterns emerge. That's how the big 5 personality traits has evolved. And that's what makes them so solid and so reliable, is that they started with data and then led to patterns rather than looking for patterns and a little bit of data. And so this is definitely how I approach my clients, is let's collect as much data as possible and see what patterns emerge. And it's how I try to approach my own life. So, all right, I'm off my tactical soapbox now.
Okay. So here's a couple. I'm glad you said that because there was also a part in your video where you were proposing that maybe the red pill community, whatever that manosphere, whatever, is more of like an echo chamber. Where all we're doing is looking for stories that fit that. And this would be one of those stories, right? So if I've got this one guy who calls in or chimes in here on Rich's show, and that's one data point. But if I've got 18 years of guys telling me pretty much the same thing or something similar to that, is that not then an aggregate of more data, like you're saying before, so that I can formulate some? Because here's the thing is, I don't think that hypergamy is just about ovulatory shift. I think it's a big part of it for sure, but I don't think that is the whole of it. I think it fits very well. It's a as far as evolutionary psychology is concerned, but it's not just the whole. It's not the whole thing. It's stories like this. And the other thing I was going to say is I can relate to this because that was the same thing with my wife. My wife was dating guys who were making a whole lot more money than I was when she was, dating at the hospital or wherever she was at. Along comes me, and she has more fun with me and wants to knock it out with me, to the point where she's going to put these guys off who have a lot of money to get with me. And here we are 24 years later, right? So that's one data set, his data set. There's a whole bunch of other data sets. And as you were saying before is, after a while, you begin to see these patterns. And people keep thinking that I have some sort of predictive, I'm Rollo Damas, right? I can predict the future. I'm just really good at pattern recognition.
You are. And I'll give you an offhand comment. This is a comment or a compliment for you, Rollo. You're a little paranoid. And I dig that about you because
I'm a lot paranoid.
Okay, so you're a lot paranoid. I think you have to be careful with that because I think paranoia can take you, not you individually,
down the wrong way.
It can take you down the wrong path. But what's the difference between pattern recognition and paranoia? I don't really know. I know that you seem to be much more on the pattern recognition side. I don't see you getting off the reservation. But I think it's something you have to be careful of, just like I have to be careful of it because I'm a little paranoid too.
So what I would ask this guy now, here's how I would diagnose this, doctor. I would ask this guy, I would say, well, how old is this woman? is she in her epiphany phase? Is she in, at what phase of maturity is she? And what are her circumstances? What are the variables? Like, before we go and we throw this and say, okay, this is a good example of hypergamy, even if it is an example of hypergamy, what are the variables that would incentivize this woman to go off with the guys who are rich, break up with him, come back and knock it out with him for a while, and then go off and repeat the same pattern again? What is it that she's seeking? What is it that is unique to a woman's life at whatever phase of maturity that she happens to be in? Again, this is a variable. I've said this before. I wrote the whole second book about this. Is that there are variables that confound hypergamy that are not necessarily unique to the individual, but unique to where that individual, that particularly with women, if we're going to look at hypergamy as women's innate mating strategy, where they are in their lives and what are the circumstances that they find themselves in.
So you can see strong patterns there.
Yeah, so you can
see patterns. So I've just put the invite link there in the chat for Buckenrod. He said he can join in and maybe answer some of these questions. We can kind of deal with this live. I think that
okay.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine too. But before he gets in here, I just was going to say that another thing that I'm going to tell you a really bad story here, but one thing that guys always will say is, like, when I went and did my my talk at the first 21 convention, the very first talk I did was called Hypergamy Micro to Macro. And pretty much the first part of that, I was following along with a lot of what Marty Hazelton was talking about, only I was taking that data and was applying it to how it could be useful to guys. So if you've got women, and let's just say for sake of argument that she's right about human estrus and everything else, I always said that, I said this in the beginning, I said, look, when a woman is in her proliferative phase, that's what we call the alpha phase. So you alpha it up, you chop wood, you go shirtless, whatever, to improve your chances. And if you can figure out where that woman is in her ovulatory cycle, then you can cater your game to getting with that woman. Well, what happened is this, and I've had this actually happen to myself, is what happens when you meet a woman and you know damn well, and I won't tell you, well, you probably know how damn well, that she is in her down cycle, right? She's on the rag, but yet she still wants to have sex with you, and she still is very enthusiastically wanting to have sex with you, even though it's that time of the month. What do you say about that? And I know, because I've been in those situations before back in my 20s, where I'd meet a girl, she was really hot for me, and regardless of wherever she was in her ovulatory cycle, she still wanted to have sex. She was still very enthusiastic. So it was almost as if she was, in her proliferative phase, but she really wasn't. Well, then we can sort of just from there extrapolate that, well, hypergamy can't afford to miss a chance of reproduction with a high value man. I don't want to gloss myself, but let's just say, for sake of argument, that something like this happens. A lot of people will say this, and you probably heard this as well, is that, like, hypergamy or even evolutionary psychology is what's called just so thinking. Which is, here's the evidence, here's the data set, here's what we have, and we try to formulate something that, like, after the fact rationalizations of what's actually happened. So what I would say in that case is well, if you've ever gosh, I really wish we could get Godsod on here, because he'd probably explain this a whole lot better than I am. But evolutionary psychology is actually one of the most rigorously tested and retested psychologies out there right now, because it makes these claims. Because it's like, if I'm going to say, well, the reason that she's having sex with me in her down cycle is because she sees me as such a high value guy that she wants to have sex with me to keep me on the hook, so that when she is in her proliferative phase, that I'm right there, Johnny on the spot, to impregnate her and we can have babies, because it's all about babies.
Well, and evolutionary psychology also gets stress tested because it's politically incorrect right now. So
that too,
people involved in it really have to mind their P's and Q's.
All right, so we got hang on, let me see if I can unmute you.
What's going on, guys?
Okay, Buck, there you go.
Yep.
All right, so you guys saw his original post. Do you have questions for him, like clarifying questions? We can kind of go from there.
Well, I would start with, first of all, how old are you and how old is she?
I'm 33 and she's 39. When we got together, I was 30. She was 35.
Okay, was she married before?
She was married when she was 21.
And for how long? for how long, Buck?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Buck, you still there?
From 21.
Yep.
Yeah. From 21
Okay.
till when did she get divorced?
She got divorced like a year after they got married. So it was a very, immature relationship.
Oh,
kind
so
of
very
thing.
short then.
Yeah.
Okay. Does she have kids already?
Yes, she had a kid. Father was never in the picture ever. Has never even seen the child before in person.
Okay. And you said you're 33 and she's 39?
Yeah, and I have a child as well that I've been raising by myself for 8 years. She's 10.
Okay. Well, by my estimation, she's kind of falling into the alpha reinterest phase of her life, really. And if you go and you look at the timeline that I came up with in preventive medicine, I would say that if correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would say that when women get to a certain age, when they get to be about into their 40s, I think that there is an aspect of their psyche that knows that the last eggs are going to be dropping pretty soon. A lot of women will report this too. They say that they have a much higher libido when they get to be their 40s, and women will like sort of say that, oh, I'm hitting my sexual prime now that I'm in my 40s, but it's really sort of a reinterest in sex because it's a subconscious effort to get pregnant before the last egg drops.
Hey,
Would be one possibility.
Hey, Buck, I got a question for you. So you said that she left you for more financially secure men. So, like, how much more?
So basically, let me break it down.
Did you lose your job, or were you on unemployment?
Let me get a little more of this. So, I just saw the Amber Heard and Johnny Depp stuff come out today. I listened to the entire 45-minute thing. It gave me chills because it was exactly like my relationship with this individual. Right?
What's the gist of that? I missed it.
Oh, the Amber Heard thing.
Yeah, break down the gist of it.
So essentially, I'll give you because we talked about this yesterday on my show. Johnny Depp was supposedly getting hit with a domestic violence case. I guess it was probably about 3 or 4 years ago. And new evidence has come out. Like they finally admitted this audio evidence of him fighting with Amber Heard, and Amber Heard is just like ripping him a new one and admitting to throwing things at him and throwing punches at him and hitting him, and pretty much just admitting to having beat the hell out of him, but like being physically violent with the guy. And of course, it goes against what the narrative was. Again, Dr. Smith is the idea that if it's a guy, then it's bad. If it's a woman, then it's okay. Now, of course, we don't hear anything, but it was, if you heard the audio of it, it is typical BPD from the woman herself. And Johnny Depp is very much a beta blue pill guy. So.
Yeah. So that's just to give a little backstory behind it. But just how Johnny in those things, he'd be like, oh, I'm just trying to leave the thing. So a lot of the times the breakups were initiated.
Breaking up, man. Can you just back up about 5 seconds? You broke up again.
So initiated by you? The breakups were initiated by you?
Yes,
yeah.
Almost all.
So you said the breakups were initiated by you?
Yes, almost all of them were initiated by me because she acted like Amber Heard, hitting, going crazy, constant accusations. The woman clearly has BPD and MPD. I've had her in a therapist office before, and the guy told me, he's like, get away. He's like, I completely agree with you that she has BPD or MPD. Be things of it. The questions of it would be that I would break up with her. She would claim that she was so satisfied with me, but then I would leave her and she would immediately jump to some dudes that have a lot of money. But then she would come back to me who I didn't make that much money. I'm talking gentlemen that had private jets, high-ranking military officials, guys that could fly her at a moment's notice to New York and rent out a private villa, those kind of things. But then she would come back from wherever her little vacation was and be blowing me up, wanting to get back together. Or something would go south with the guy and then she'd be calling me up. So it was just, it's like, what's going on here? You're so dissatisfied with me and I break up with you and give you the ability to go do what you want. You go fulfill your need with someone that has all this financial status that I do not, but then you still want to be around me.
So Buck, what's the status of things right now?
Oh, it's done and over with. And the individual has monkey branched off to a guy that she actually was.
For how long has it been over?
A couple.
A couple.
I mean, like she's
Yeah.
got the big red flag of violence, right? I mean, if she's throwing things at you and she's violent, she's physical with you. I mean, yeah. I
Oh
mean,
yeah,
do you want to talk about
absolutely.
violent women, or do you want to talk about?
No, I don't want to talk about the violent women. It's just the hypergamy part of that, of how she would just jump right to the next guy that had a lot of money. So we're looking at alpha seed, beta need. So if she was getting that fulfillment of the beta seed that she, or the beta, I'm sorry, alpha seed, the beta need that she needed from those guys that had all this money, why does she keep coming back to me, who someone she claimed she was so dissatisfied with? She didn't have anything that she wanted. You know, I couldn't take her
But
on
she's
trips and all
sexually
this other kind of
satisfied
stuff.
with you, though, right?
Right.
Exactly.
So,
Yes.
So she's
Right.
she's balancing it between the two of you. She can't get
Exactly.
like, clearly you don't have the money that these guys do, but you have something else that she wants. You balance the alpha fucks with the beta bucks. She uses two guys to get that right now. And
Right.
I really think that a lot of what you're going to see going into the next decade with respect to like relationships is going to be based a lot more on this than I think a lot of people are comfortable with. I've written a lot of stuff about how monogamy is kind of on its way out, and polyamory is going to be something that's going to be a thing pretty soon because we're standardizing on this.
Well, let me weigh in here on Buck for a minute. And Buck, first of all, man, I'm sorry. I'm glad you're out of it. It sounds brutal and miserable. So good job getting away from her. I'm going to humbly suggest here, because we got these two topics on the table. We got this framework of hypergamy. And then the other topic that's sort of loosely on the table right now is how do you process information? How do you decide what to focus on? And I would humbly suggest to you, Buck, that hypergamy is not what you need to focus on right now. What you need to focus on is how do we keep other personality disordered women out of your life, because you did it once, which means there's possibility that it will happen again. And maybe that's where the focus for you needs to be on.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I have already been putting in the work and understanding what my flaws are that allowed someone like that to come into my life, because you don't put up with shit like that unless there's something fundamentally wrong going on with you deep down inside. So I've been digging and digging and digging to think what was wrong with me to try to make that relationship work. What was wrong with me to allow me to get into something like that to begin with? Yeah. So there's been a lot of work put in place, and luckily I've read your book, and Rollo, I've read your book as well, and I wish to God I had read both of those 2.5, 3 years ago before I ever met this individual. I wouldn't be where I'm at now. Yeah. But it still is to show to me that is still there. Now, I think it's easy. I think it's more quantifiable in women that are not mentally unstable like that, cluster B or whatever kind of personality disorder you want to throw out there. But it's even because those women just kind of fly with the seat of their pants, whatever they're feeling emotionally that day, which most women are kind of irrational, and one day they think one way and one day they think the other. But when they're mentally unstable, it kind of makes the hypergamy thing kind of
it sounds like she's unstable from a whole bunch of different perspectives. You know what her notch count is? I mean, if you were a guess at it.
No, I don't have the exact number. I was told by an ex of hers from 10 years ago that at the time she had told him it was over 100 people then.
Yeah, like women that have banged a lot of guys like this are not very good at monogamy or long-term pair bonding. Anytime something goes wrong or doesn't go their way, it's not uncommon for them to go and bang somebody else just to try to kind of placate themselves. They think they can get a better deal by moving around quickly. Yeah, I know I'm starting to generalize things, and Dr. Smith.
Well, not only that, but these people are so unable to look at themselves and realize what's going on with them and why a relationship doesn't work.
It's easier to point and spot at other people, yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's easier to point and sputter, jump into the next relationship, post everything on social media, and make it look like you were the problem. Because look, this next person who's successful and has all this money finds me so great. Clearly, it was the guy over here that was the problem the whole time.
I will jump to I'll jump to the defense of the hypergamy, red pill hypergamy framework here right now, and that Rollo has this essay called "Hypergamy: The Misconceptions," and I don't agree with everything in it, but it's a really good essay. I recommend it to people. It's well written, it's well thought out, and so one of the things he talks about in there is the fact that there are these breaks that get put onto hypergamy. That there's this. I'm going to say it incorrectly. Help me out here, Rollo. But it's the subroutine. Hypergamy is a subroutine that's always running in the background. But then there are things that can impede it, like religion and upbringing and so forth. And so maybe what you see in a case like this is that all of those impedances fall away, and what you're seeing is pure hypergamous drive in this woman who's just regressed to some primitive state of operating emotionally.
when we were talking yesterday, Rich, about the Amber Heard thing with Johnny Depp, I think I said this with Ryan as well. I said, you know what, the real question here is not, is this like a question of hypergamy or whatever else? It's, why is Johnny in this situation in the first place? How did he get to that point? To where he, like, why is he the way he is with her? Does he not realize that he's Johnny Depp? And so I think that, like, just what Shawn was just saying there is, I think that hypergamy is something that is sort of an innate part of women's evolved firmware. This is how women, better the human race, really, is to find the best of the best. I mean, it's in their best interests to that hypergamy doesn't seek its own level. It's always like at or above its own level. And so within that framework, what are the variables that modifies a woman expressing that? In this case, we have a woman who is psychotic, right? We have a woman who's, her variables are that she's kind of crazy. She's 40 some odd years old. She's got a kid. She's got a notch count of 100 and something other. So those are, like, you can argue whether or not that's good or bad, but I'm just saying that that's all within sort of like the innate, like you said, subroutine that's running in the background. And also, I should say this, is that men also have an innate sexual strategy themselves that's also modified by their biologies.
Mm-hmm. All right, Buck, thanks for hopping in, man.
Yeah, good luck, man.
Absolutely.
All right, so we'll pull Buck out. Let me just get to these super chats up here before I lose them here in the chat. There's MK says, why don't they see the breadwinners that they end up with later on as alphas worthy of mating with earlier? If hypergamy is truly about survival and securing the best genes, why ride the carousel?
Again, it's alpha seed and beta need. And from that study, this is when a couple gets together and the woman is not making as much as the guy. You're looking at a shift that happened after the relationship has been established. So you got the guy who maybe he's making, let's just say $10,000 more than her per year. Now suddenly she gets a bump in pay and she's making $50,000 a year. That's going to change the dynamics of the beta buck side of hypergamy, but maybe it doesn't change that, depending on whether the guy is really alpha or whatever. It might not change the alpha seed side of that relationship, because when you got a monogamous relationship between a man and a woman, you're looking at a woman who has decided that this is the best she can do. This is the guy that is she wants to have babies with, and she wants to live a life with until death do us part. And so that guy has to be the best of both worlds. He has to be the guy that she wants to sleep with and the guy that she wants to live with. Now, when he goes from being her best lay and her best economic option to being just her best lay, well, is that enough to offset the fact that she's now making more money? Remember that these studies are done in Finland, and Finland is one of the Scandinavian countries that is at least an example of like an egalitarian society. So men and women supposedly have equal access to do whatever the hell that they want. And of course, studies show that when they're in those egalitarian societies, that men and women tend to still segregate themselves naturally into traditional gender roles. So you've got the man who is going to be expected to be the breadwinner, the guys who are expected to be the man, the woman is expected to be sort of the submissive, the mother, all that. Well, when you switch those things out, what happens? Well, we're seeing at least a 15-17% incidence of divorce when that woman goes from not making as much as the guy to making a lot more than that guy.
Yeah, it's almost as if men and women have free will about this stuff, and they actually like men and women being men and women.
Well, is it free? Okay, then that's actually on my list here. Is it determinism or is it free will?
Yeah, I don't know.
I
think above my pay grade.
I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest. I think that we have, and this is where I get in trouble with like the moral philosophers and all that. Of course, everybody knows I'm writing a book about religion right now, but I think that we do ourselves a disservice when we don't account for our natural evolved influences, our incentives, the things that make us what we are. I mean, I'm not saying that we can't have control over those. We do, but we also have to remember that they're still there. That's the operative framework that we as human beings live in. Now, can we override those? Damn well. Yeah, we can. We can learn to do that. We can learn to to master our natural proclivities, like whatever. It's like what I say. It's learning to turn into the skid instead of with the skid, because your natural, like if you've ever been to driver's ed, they teach you to turn into the skid. If you ever find yourself like turning, because your natural instinct is to turn or slam on the brakes, which makes things worse. But if you can train yourself to turn into the skid, what happens? It rights the car and you can keep going on. But you have to learn to get past that natural instinct to want to slam on the brakes and stop everything, because you're just going to make it worse if you do that. Also, like martial arts, for instance. We don't want to put our face in front of a speeding fist, but if we are trained and we know how to defend ourselves and we know how to do things, then yes, we can stand up for ourselves and we can learn to tamp down that natural proclivity to just, run away or fight like an idiot, So I think that we have an ability to override those natural proclivities, but that doesn't mean that those natural proclivities go away.
I don't know, man. My specialty used to be the face block. Pretty good at it.
The headbutt, yeah.
Rollo, what's your take on that super chat there from the Black Sheep? He said, "Could you say hypergamy is supporting a woman's fantasy?" I don't think they fantasize about hypergamy.
Okay, well, that I think where he's going with this is the 50 Shades of Grey paradox. Here is, if women aren't hypergamous, then why do they spend a whole shit ton of money on things like Twilight or 50 Shades of Grey? Or really, if you go and you look at any romance novel, they all follow the same formula. And if you want to write a successful romance novel and make a lot of money, you have to follow that formula, because anytime anyone has ever tried to break from that formula, they go away. They fail. So, and what is that? It's usually the Beauty and the Beast thing. It's the guy who is this alpha, force of nature, who is untamable. It's what I've always said is the script. You got the guy who's just this incorrigible bastard. You have Han Solo, and you've got and only Princess Leia can tame the savage beast, or the beast is who Belle falls in love with, and because of her unique feminine talents, she tames him and loves him forever, and they he turns into the prince, and they live happily ever after. Well, what do you have in that formula? You've got the beast, who is the alpha seed, and the prince, who ends up becoming the beta need. So you go through this raw sexual, short-term sexual arousal to that horrible bastard, and then eventually, because she's the soulmate, she turns him into the prince, the provider prince. So there's a lot of our archetypes, a lot of our old stories revolve around women's mating strategy.
There's another comment here on a super chat from Live Free. I can't put it up on the screen for some reason. It's not importing onto a StreamYard, but I'll just read it out. Live Free said, "Thoughts on why women have sex by Buss." I'm assuming that's David Buss. I haven't read that book yet, but he goes on to say there's many reasons why women have sex that's not due to hypergamy. Women are extremely irrational and sometimes make sexual decisions contrary to hypergamy. Do you know what he's on about? I haven't read that book.
Basically what it is David Buss argues that it's not always an evolutionary incentive for women to have sex. And this goes back to what I've always said about transactional sex versus validational sex. So a prostitute a sex worker who makes her living from having sex. She doesn't want to have sex. Maybe she does with a few of them, but like by and large, she probably doesn't want to have sex with those guys. But she's still having that. She's broken down the desire aspect to a transactional nature. Why do porn stars keep going back to it? I would say that there's probably, for some of them, there's some enjoyment in it, but for most of them, it's a transaction and they make a lot of money at it. Why do strippers strip as well? I think that at some point, depending on the woman, she realizes the exchange value of that sex has and the agency she has over men. So is that an evolutionary adaptation, or is that her saying, you know what, I'm just going to have sex because I feel like having sex? I don't think too many women actually view sex from just sort of, willy-nilly, just, randomly having, oh, hey, want to have sex? I think that there's a lot more to it than that. But then you get, like I said, you get cases where there's transactional sex versus validational sex. And this goes back also to what we were talking about when it comes to enthusiastic consent. Right now, I think, and we're entering some real dangerous territory here, is that rape can be construed as any kind of sex that a woman didn't want to have. So if she has kind of like the gray area sex where it's like more convenient for her to have the sex than to not have the sex, and she goes through with it, that can be construed as rape right now. Or
sorry, I just want to take the conversation back to Shawn for a minute, because I feel like we missed something here that's kind of important, because the whole driving force that brought us all together here tonight was when both Shawn and Robert said they don't see a lot of evidence of it in their clinical practice. So Shawn, we've known each other for a couple of years now. I know you've read Rollo's work and a number of his essays. We've interacted independently together, whatever, like a number of times. So I know that you're familiar with things. You've never once had a client or a patient in and you've thought to yourself, oh, hypergamy right there. Like, it's never come up, or is it not viewed that way, or is it just because of the way that you assess people when they're coming in looking for counseling?
If I said
clarity around it.
If I said I never see it in my practice, I misspoke, because I mean, like I said, I see it everywhere.
I think you said that you don't see a lot of evidence of it in your practice, or maybe it was Robert that said that.
I think
that might have been Robert. But
Yeah.
what I don't see in my practice, and my practice is not a representative sample. Okay, my clients are generally wealthy. They're motivated to work things out and stay together. So, you know, the kind of woman that Buck dated, she's not going to find her way to my practice. It's just so I acknowledge that it's not representative. What I see, what I meant to say is that I don't see hypergamy as a causal factor in women initiating divorces and affairs in my practice. I'm not saying it doesn't happen.
What do you see? Like, is there a common thread? You see a number of different variables?
what do you see what is the most common reason for a woman to initiate a divorce, according to, like, by your practice, by who comes in your door?
Simplest, broadest answer is that things have been degenerating for a long time, and things could be anything. It could be he's just or they're both lousy communicators. It's that they don't trust each other. It's that their basic values are misaligned on children, sex, religion, money, that kind of stuff. And then these things fester for a long time. And yeah, that's about it. That it's kind of the basic, boring stuff that you find in epidemiological studies. And so, you know, I know that there are guys out there and say, well, it's always a case of hypergamy. If she's leaving him or whatever, it's always hypergamy at play when things fall apart. I mean, I guess you could say that hypergamy covers everything. Like, he became an alcoholic so that she could be hypergamous and leave, if you want to take it that far. But that's the kind of thing that I see in my practice. Is, you know, one of the case studies I came in with was, I'll read you one of my case studies. This was a couple that I saw for a while. I'm stuttering a little bit because I have to be very careful about
don't say any
details.
names.
Yeah. And so this could actually be one of several couples, but they came in after him being in and out of alcoholism for about 20 years. And there was an incident with a family member, and, you know, nothing lurid. It's just something, you know, out of control talk and so forth. And after 20 years of, you know, dealing with the lies and finding the bottles in the garage and, you know, just all the stuff that goes along with living with an alcoholic, she just said, you know, I'm done. You either fix it or we're done. And so this is, you know, in my estimation, a pretty common scenario of a woman initiating a divorce because she's had it. And usually they've been, the ones that I meet have been pushed pretty far. And so, you know, is this hypergamy, or is this just alcoholism and all the stuff that goes along with it?
Okay, so let me ask you this question then. So the guy's got a drinking problem. Did it derail him from his purpose as a man in providing for the family and earning financial resources to pay for things, to be a father, to be with the kids, to be a husband? Like, did that take him off that purpose?
It to a degree.
Because some people can drink and still do those things, right?
No, he was high functioning. His dick didn't work for about 15 years, and that was another thing that she was fed up with. But yeah, he was high enough functioning.
Okay,
they were living comfortably.
I'm just going to throw this out there. How's that not hypergamy? I mean, if he's no longer the best that she can do, and she says, "I'm done," either fix it or I'm out of here. Like, is that not what hypergamy is? She feels like she can get a better deal.
No, because the solution to the problem isn't to send her to a 12-step hypergamy program. The solution to the problem is to treat the alcoholism.
Yeah.
And so clinically,
And I don't
no,
disagree
it's
with you.
not.
Like he's got to get back on the path
Yeah, the
of,
treatment is
you know,
is what it
chasing
is.
excellence and you know,
Yeah.
being a man of purpose and vision and
Right,
My
you can call it hypergamy if you want. It doesn't add anything to my conceptualization of the case to call it hypergamy. She's
Oh
fed
yeah,
up with him.
but
Okay,
yeah, well,
so
because
she's fed up with it.
you're trying to solve the problem that, and
Yeah, I'm trying to get them
as you
patched up
should, yeah.
and back on the road. And
Mhm.
so I can call it hypergamy. It doesn't add anything to my understanding. It
Um,
actually detracts a little bit.
well, what? Okay, so this is a guy who's an alcoholic. Okay, but like you were saying before, like guys, like maybe maybe an alcoholic. Like what drove the guy to drink? You know, why does the guy feel like he wants to do those things? When you talk about, and I've talked with guys myself where they say, I don't want to, I'm in a sexless marriage. And every time I initiate sex, she doesn't want to have sex with me. She's not talking to me. She does, you know, whatever else. And the guy goes through, 10 years of this. And there's no communication. Maybe when they come in to see you and there's no communication there, you look at that and you say, okay, well, these two need to communicate. They need to negotiate. They need to do whatever. Rather than seeing like the root of the problem, like going back and saying, well, the reason she doesn't want to have sex with you is because you're a fat slob, or you're not the guy that she wanted to be with, or she, in the back of her head, maybe she says she can get better than you, but she's stuck with you. There are, like I said, there's variables in there. The subroutine is still running. It's still hypergamy, but it's like you're seeing, I think, the like 4 stages down the line result of where they are from a root problem
Which is hypergamy?
which could be related to hypergamy. Could be related to it. So there might be it might be like I said, I've got guys, and I talk to mostly men about this. I do talk to a handful of women, but when the most common problem that I get from guys is they get into a sexless marriage and they don't understand why they're where they're at, because what they do is they try to communicate, right? They try to try to do chore play. They try to negotiate for, genuine desire. And I keep saying to myself, well, why is it that she has no genuine desire for you? Albeit you guys are married. So there had to have been some kind of desire, right? At some point. And this is what I see commonly. Maybe you see a whole lot you probably see a variety of people that I don't see. But when I'm talking to guys, I kind of rewind it and I go, okay, from the framework of hypergamy, why would a woman hold out on a guy and decide that she doesn't want to have sex with him, or she wants to end the marriage? Alcoholism might be it, but how did he get to be an alcoholic in the first place? Okay. Maybe he just gave up.
So this is the problem, and this is why I have to be very careful about applying theoretical frameworks. And a lot of psychologists do. They start with a theoretical framework, and it's one of the reasons I don't mind saying I am a very good psychologist. I'm really good at patching people up and getting them back on the road with certain problems. Some problems I can't work with, but if I wanted to start with the hypergamy framework, yeah, I can work it back to hypergamy. If I wanted to start with an attachment theory framework, yeah, I can work it back and get it back to attachment theory. If I want to start with a religious framework, yep, I can take it all the way back and find some religious problem that started it all. It doesn't help me. And the reason I said that it actually detracts a little bit in a situation like this to say, well, hypergamy is her motivation, is because when I do that, I'm throwing out a ton of information, and the information that I'm disregarding is her contribution to the pattern, because this alcoholism, it doesn't matter where it came from, but it didn't exist in a vacuum, this alcoholism. It was very wrapped up in her disapproval and him hiding, and there was a lot of patterns that existed around his alcoholism, and some of those patterns belonged to her. And if I say to myself, well, that's just attachment theory, well, that's just hypergamy, that's just religion, then I'm disregarding all of that, and I become a much less effective problem solver. Now, everybody out there isn't trying to solve problems to this degree and really digging into data, but everybody out there is solving this level of problem in their own personal life. And that's why I'm arguing in this video that I made that it's wise to be very careful about the information that you hang on to and the information that you disregard. And one of the hardest things I struggle with is setting aside my theoretical frameworks when I meet somebody new. It's very difficult to do.
Mm-hmm. So a success to you is to just put the couple together and get them back in functioning in a marriage? Like
The success to me is to serve my client. So if they're saying we need you to help us get back together, then all right, I'll work with you on that until it becomes apparent that I'm wasting your time and money. Then I will tell you I'm wasting your time and money, and I'll maybe try to give you some other options. But if their approach, if what they're looking for is we want to end this peacefully, all right, I'll help with that too. I work for my clients.
Do you who? I think I know how you're going to answer this, but who seeks you out more, men or women?
Well, individually, it's about 50-50.
Like if there's a couple that are like, because since we're talking about hypergamy, if there's a couple and they've got problems, who is the one that hits you up?
I'm going to say somewhere between 55-45 or 60-40 that it's usually the woman.
Okay.
But I'm a surprising number of men will initiate, they'll be the ones to hire me.
Do you think that they approach the clinical psychologist from different perspectives? Like, do the women come to you from a different angle than the men do if they want to bring the relationship to your office?
Help me out there. What do you mean?
I don't know. Okay, so let me take a stab at it from this direction. Like, would guys show up more so trying to negotiate a way to get arousal and desire back in the relationship versus maybe a woman coming at it from just fix him, he's broken, see what you can do with him, sort of thing? I'm just wondering how they come at you.
I'd say it's about equal, that male or female, whoever first hires me, probably 30-40% of the time, I'm picking numbers here, 30-40% of the time they want me to just fix the other person, and I have to work with that before I can do anything else.
Okay.
What's the number one problem they come in with? Like the thing you see the most?
I'm guessing it's money.
Is it money? Is it sex? Is it I know those are the top two things. It's got to be money or sex, but like in your own practice, what do you see?
Sex is a big one, and it goes both ways. Guys are unhappy with it. Guys are not getting enough, or girls are not getting enough. That kind of goes both ways. But usually, it is some pattern of communication that has really taken on a life of its own and infiltrated the relationship. And they have this pattern where they don't even have any control over what they're saying to each other in certain moments.
Have you seen? There's a maybe I should. This is kind of silly. It might be scripted, but there's that new Showtime show that's out there where it's a female therapist, and she sees like all these couples from like sort of different walks of life. There's the lesbian couple, and then there's the mixed race couple, and then there's I don't know if you've seen that, but like in every single one of these, it's not about money. It's all about sex and who's no good at it, and how there wants to be a divorce because of, maybe it's salacious, maybe it's just like, scripted or whatever, but there's supposed to be real cases. And that's why I said, because I from what I know, from the statistics that I know, that the most common reason for men and women to seek out marriage therapy or whatever is because of sex.
I don't know. Yeah. There are sex therapists out there, and I think that people tend to seek out the sex therapist, and I'm not a sex therapist.
For that. Yeah.
Do you find you, like, what do they look up in the yellow pages when they're looking for Dr. Shawn Smith?
I don't even know how people find me. I don't even ask. I'll ask where they refer. I get a lot of referrals from the community.
Oh, okay.
Like somebody told me last week that they told me what other professional referred them to me, and that I'm highly thought of.
Gotcha.
By that particular person.
Okay. We got like 10 minutes left, guys, before we wrap up the show. Is there anything that we missed that we definitely want to cover before we wrap up?
Well, I got a question, and I don't know what the answer to this is. So I'll put it out there because I wrestle with this quite a bit. That you brought up the point earlier, Rollo. I think you were starting to bring up the point about when you see a pattern in the world, it's obviously legitimate. Like, I remember when I was a kid, my grandparents lived in this little town called Ness City, Kansas, and nobody locked their doors in Ness City, Kansas. And I remember at one point when I was 7 or 8 years old, they started locking the door at night. Everybody started locking the door at night. And what happened was that somebody, for the first time, had gotten broken in and robbed, right? So there was a pattern, there was an N of 1 where somebody got violated, and then everybody else started locking their doors. And that was a wise thing to do. It wasn't an overreaction. It was a reasonable precaution. And so when you're hearing stories from people like Rollo, you hear certain types of information come to you, and certain types of information come to me, and Rich, certain types of information come to you. And all of our information streams get filtered somewhat before they reach us. I mean, is that a fair assessment?
Okay. Red pill lens. Yeah.
And so when you see a pattern of the same story and over, like say, Rollo, say 1 million guys tell you the same story, and out of a population of 7.8 billion, that's like 1/80th of 1% or something like this. It's nothing that you'd want to generalize from, but it's sort of like that case in Ness City, Kansas, where one person got robbed. So what's the reasonable precaution when you hear something that's probably not representative, but it's obviously happening in the world?
Well, see, so I just wrote about a 4,000 word essay 2 weeks ago called, what is it? It's like the old order thinking versus new order thinking. And what I was trying to outline in that is that we are finally reaching, I think, a point in human history where a lot of our old order presumptions are getting challenged by a lot of new order information. For instance, the first thing that men did, not the man, there was no manosphere back in 1998, let's just say, 21 years ago, there was no manosphere, but the internet was coming up. And one of the first things that we do is guys get together and we start comparing notes. And we have forums like Alt Fast Seduction or So Suave or these other places. So guys come together from all over the world. And what these guys are doing, essentially, they didn't realize this at the time, but all these guys are getting together, and you get like the early pickup artists. You get the guys who are the game theorists. You get mystery method, and you get really anything that was going on in alt fast seduction, because guys wanted to figure out how to get laid. And prior to the internet, the only way that you could ever learn about like whatever game was by answering an ad in the back of a Hustler magazine or something, how to get girls, but once the internet started granting us the access that we've never had before, we started coming together and we started collecting all of this information. So now you've got people from all over the world, and not just the United States. We're talking about a worldwide population of guys, and it's not just one demographic of guys, it's guys from every demographic. So you've got teenage kids, and you've got guys who are in their 70s still trying to figure out how to get their wives to have sex with them. So it's all these guys that come together, and that's where I'm not gonna say I disagree, but I was gonna say is that I think that the aggregate of information is only getting larger. This is just with what we have now. Like right now, we can be on YouTube and talk, wherever everybody is. Rich is in Canada, I'm in Reno, and you're in Colorado. But we never had this access before. It's been unprecedented in human history where we have this kind of access, where we can aggregate all this information, and we can we can at least try to parse it out. We can try to figure out what we see, or what's the patterns in this information. In this case, since we're talking about intersexual dynamics, I am getting information from guys all over the freaking world, really. I mean, so what do I do with that? What are the patterns that I use? I think it's probably a lot bigger data set than you think it is, but I still understand what you're saying, though. You still have to be careful about applying that or putting your own personal bias in that, as to I've always said this. I have like an obligation to the truth. I have an obligation to try to be as objective as I can. And in every single book I've ever written, I've said, look, I understand that it is impossible to have an entirely objective take on all of this stuff. I think we need to have a dedication and an obligation to staying as objective as we can. But right now, I think it's probably going to get worse before it gets better, because the technology is outpacing our ability to sort of figure out what it is that we are supposed to do with that. If you look at things like, say, was it Pornhub? Like Pornhub has a really great blog for data on the really the American male, but like the sex habits of every man and woman across the planet who jerks off to Pornhub. We've never had that information before, and that's hard data. It's not like, oh, I wonder if this is true or not. It's what they're seeing in their own statistics, and they're putting it out there, and they're saying, parse it, do whatever you're going to do with it. So if I take it, I'm going to interpret it one way. You might interpret it a different way. Dr. Everett Piper will probably parse it in another way. And I think that if you're listening to me, if you're listening to anybody on this panel, if you're listening to whoever it is that you look up to in as I don't say authority, but as a person who is understanding and parsing this data and what they think of it, you have to understand who that person is. Like what are they about? Why did they get into doing what they're doing? Clearly you're a psychologist and you decided that's what you want to do with your life. So there's that. I think that anybody who is looking at this stuff really needs to, they need to get an objective understanding from the guys who they look up to. And that includes me, that includes anybody else. So that's really the best I can do with it. But like I said, it's only going to get more complex and more tangled up than it is right now. It's not going to get easier in the future. So,
yeah. So I guess you take reasonable precautions and you try not to over adjust. Like if everybody in Nest City, Kansas had run out and bought guard dogs and alarm systems, that probably would have been a little too much.
Well, and then like I said at the very beginning of this is, we go through cycles, particularly in the manosphere, and this is probably the second or the third time I've seen this cycle repeat itself. We go through the moralism cycle. We go through the grifter cycle. Right now, we're going through the sort of nihilism cycle where it's like the MGTOWs and the black pill, adherents want to say, oh, they're the guys who are buying, the locks and the dogs and the guns and everything because one person, got boosted the other day. So there's that overcompensation or that overreaction, but are they erring on the side of overreaction or are they erring on the side of underreaction? And I think that somewhere in the middle is where people kind of need to, I don't know, evaluate.
It depends on your risk tolerance too, and how much you're putting on.
What you have to lose. Yes.
Yeah.
All right, gentlemen. It's been a great discussion. Before we wrap up real quick, I just want to shout out to the channel sponsors. Let me just go solo layout here. The ticker's on the bottom there for the Grondike Soap Company for tactical soap and beard oil. It's top shelf stuff. So if you've enjoyed the show and you want to support the creation of content, you can grab some of the links pinned in the top description or just go to coopersoap.com. There's also a secondary sponsor. I'll just switch over to alphafit.fit. These guys put together training programs for guys over 35. You want to get your swagger and your energy back. They've got all kinds of supplements and training programs there, and it's a monthly subscription, so it's a really, really good setup. So check that out. Go back here, and what are you guys working on that's coming up? We got Shawn. We got Kant coming on in 2 weeks' time for another show. He had a follow-up to the one that we did, right?
Yeah, I forgot exactly what the topic was, but it was a continuation of rites of passage. Had to do with the mother-son
rites of passage and cutting ties with the mom, like cutting the umbilical cord. Something. Yeah. Okay. So that'll be in 2 weeks' time. That'll be on the 17th, 8 p.m. Eastern. I've got a Playing to Win episode this Thursday with a guy that puts together incredible courses. He's also a bit of a Chad, so he's going to have some interesting stories to share there. So that'll be 8 p.m. on Thursday night. It's a Playing to Win episode versus Playing Not to Lose, which is what a lot of guys do.
Oh, but, I owe you an overlay for that, don't I?
Yeah, if you got one, I'll definitely take it from you. Thanks, Rollo.
Sure.
Yeah, but if you want to shout out anything you're working on in the next week or so, just quickly wind out and.
I am just working on book 4. That is like my whole existence. I'm sleeping, and shitting book 4 right now. So that's where I'm at. I will be on my regular Wednesday show. I'm working on a couple of guys that haven't confirmed with me just yet, but I'm probably going to have an interview on Wednesday. And then of course we do Rule 0 on Saturday. I'm also working on how we're going to do some branding for this event that you and I are going to be doing.
Let's take a minute on that again. So we were talking on Rule 0 and on your show the other day. So if you guys are interested in a workshop we're putting together mid-April, we're releasing the exact dates and location to people from our own communities. So guys, if you're in my community, you already know about it. It's on the events tab. If you want to get in, Again, it's also pinned in the top comment, but it's entrepreneursandcars.com/community. The details are all there. There'll be at least a day-long workshop, privately held. It's going to be good stuff. I mean, we'll get you all the details.
It's going to be good. It's going to be fun too, because I like it when we just do kind of like spontaneous stuff like this. It's cool.
Yeah, we're calling it like Rule Zero Live or something.
Rule Zero Live. Yeah.
Cool with it. Shawn, what have you been up to? Do you want to shout out to anything you're working on these days?
I got nothing. I'm looking for my next project. I'll keep you posted.
You had a book that you said you were going to write this year.
I'm still toying with it.
You're toying on it? Okay,
Yep.
good. All right, guys. It's been a fun discussion. I'm glad it didn't have to turn into Dr. Smith destroyed Rollo. Fatal kill.
No, but here's what's going to happen. Tomorrow someone on Twitter is going to be asking, so when you say you don't believe in hypergamy.
Yeah.
It's always fun. Thank you, gentlemen. Look forward to the next one. Thanks for joining us, Rollo.
Sure. Anytime.
All right, see you guys.